How does a kid from a broken home in Michigan go from almost quitting music to becoming the voice of America's working class? Bob Seger's story isn't the glossy overnight success you hear at award shows. It's long nights and longer drives, a van that always smells like gear and coffee, crowds that don't care yet, and a stubborn belief that if you sing the truth loud enough, somebody will finally listen. He didn't come out of the gate rich or connected. He came out hungry. And before the world knew his name, he almost walked away from the whole thing. Robert Clark Seger was born in Dearborn and grew up in nearby Ann Arbor, a town where the radio could pull in stations from hundreds of miles away after midnight. His father played in big bands and worked at Ford, so rhythm was part of the furniture. Home wasn't peaceful, arguments sparked, bottles clinked. When Seger was 10, his dad left, and the family slipped into the rough kind of budget where every bill is a negotiation. His mother cleaned houses. His older brother worked. Bob picked up the old guitar his father left behind and taught himself shapes and stories. The music in the house wasn't a hobby. It became a way out. Late at night, he'd tune the dial until the static thinned and the signal hit clean. Little Richard, Wilson Pickett, James Brown, the master of dynamics. The stop-start thunder that felt like someone slamming a door and opening a window at the same time. That education didn't come with sheet music. It came from the way a voice can split a room in half and make everyone lean forward. If you want to know where Seger's own fire came from, start with those late-night stations and the shock of hearing soul singers set a microphone on fire. He jumped into local bands the way kids jump into pickup games. No plan, just energy. The gigs were gyms, teen clubs, union halls, and bars that paid in cash if they paid at all. Then came the first jolt. With the Bob Seger system, he cut a single that actually moved, Ramblin' Gamblin' Man. It sounded like a door getting kicked open, an organ riff with its own swagger, a voice already carrying gravel and gasoline. The song climbed, phones rang. For a minute, the future looked simple. But the music business is a roller coaster with a broken seatbelt, and the follow-up stalled. Albums missed. The label wanted another hit on schedule. The songs didn't care about schedules. When the wheel stops spinning, the room gets quiet. Bob Seger put out an acoustic-leaning album, Brand New Morning, the kind of pivot artists make when they're searching for a true north. Critics didn't catch it. The market shrugged. The band fell apart. Imagine the headspace. 20-something. A taste of the dream in your mouth. And then a stretch where nothing you do seems to land. Plenty of musicians bow out right there. They get a day job, they tell themselves they'll write again someday, and the guitar ends up in a closet. He didn't quit, but he could have. That's how close this story came to never happening. Instead, he did the least glamorous, most effective thing. He got back in the van. He built a new band piece by piece, the kind of players who can read a room and hit the gas when the crowd starts to tip. He took opener slots for acts whose audiences weren't interested in warm-up sets. REO Speedwagon, Aerosmith, Kiss. If you've ever tried to win over a crowd wearing someone else's t-shirt, you know the odds. Some nights people booed. Some nights nobody listened until the third song. But every show sharpened the edges. By the end of a set, he could turn a room that didn't come to see him into a room that didn't want him to leave. On the long and lonesome highways between those shows, he wrote a song that felt like a diary entry you shouldn't be reading. Turn the page. You can hear the fluorescent diner lights in the sax. You can feel the judgment in the way people size you up at a truck stop. The tired humor of being recognized and not recognized at the same time. It wasn't a smash at first. It didn't need to be. It was a truth pressed onto tape. And truths tend to travel. Musicians adopted it. Truckers blasted it at 2 a.m. It became the soundtrack for anyone who's ever done the miles for a calling that almost doesn't love you back. But outside Michigan, Bob Seger was still a rumor. The studio albums didn't capture the voltage of the live show. That's when his manager, Punch Andrews, suggested a gamble that sounded like career roulette. Cut a live album in Detroit and let the world hear what happens when the hometown crowd meets the hometown band. Live records rarely broke artists. They were usually souvenirs for fans you already had. Bob Seger didn't have that luxury. He needed the tape to do the talking. They booked Cobo Hall. The band hit like a freight train. Detroit roared like an extra instrument. When the quiet verses landed, you could hear 10,000 people hold the air. When the choruses took off, the building lifted. Live Bullet didn't detonate instantly, it simmered. Radio started spinning those versions because they felt undeniable. Word of mouth crossed state lines. Suddenly, the rest of America could hear what Detroit had been screaming about. This wasn't just a good singer. This was a blue-collar, Springsteen meets soul preacher who made rock feel like testimony. 6 months later, the spark caught the whole field. Night Moves arrived sounding like nothing else on the dial and everything you remember about being young at the same time. The title track is the rare song that makes time elastic. You're there at the lake, you're in the car. The summer is endless until it isn't, and you feel that change, not as a plot point, but as a weather pattern. It's not about winning or posing. It's about the ache of realizing a moment while you're still inside it. That's a delicate trick, and he nailed it. The label called it a career record. And for once, the label was right. The rest of the album wasn't filler. Main Street sketched a neon-lit boulevard any small-town kid could map in their sleep. Rock and Roll Never Forgets reminded you that even if the radio changes, the reason you reached for it in the first place doesn't. With that 1-2 punch, Live Bullet proving the band, and Night Moves proving the pen, Bob Seger stopped being a Michigan secret and became a national voice. The late 70s were a run straight out of a victory lap. Stranger in Town delivered stereo-stretching singles. Hollywood Nights, with its headlights on high beam rush, still the same, cutting clean through a familiar type, and We've Got Tonight, a late-hour truce between two people choosing each other for one moment that matters. Then, Against the Wind blew in with a slower heartbeat and heavier thoughts. It was a grown-up record about the cost of momentum, how time's breeze can turn into a headwind when you're not looking. The album soared. Awards followed. If you were alive and near a radio, you knew those choruses even if you didn't know his biography. And the concentric circles kept widening. He co-wrote Heartache Tonight with his old friend Glenn Frey, the Detroit kid who'd gone west and helped build the Eagles. It went to #1. Two hometown guys now wielding the biggest stages in America took a barroom stomp and handed it to the country like a gift. Those victories felt different because they didn't erase the grind that came before. They framed it. With success came the kind of decision that divides fans. Do you guard the music fiercely from commercial use? Or do you let a song go live in the culture wherever it lands? In the mid-'80s, Bob Seger answered by licensing Like a Rock to Chevrolet. For more than a decade, the song became the pulse of their truck commercials. Work, responsibility, durability. Some listeners called it a perfect fit, blue-collar art backing blue-collar machines. Others called it a sellout move, a great song stapled to a sales pitch. He didn't thrash around explaining himself. He'd always said the song was about endurance and identity. If that message reached people through an ad, he could live with that. The debate burned. The catalog kept moving. Then he did the rarest thing a star can do in mid-stride. He stepped away. Not because the charts stopped liking him, but because his kids needed a present father more than his career needed a present legend. Touring and parenting can coexist, but not always well. And he chose the harder road again, the one with less applause and more meaning. Years passed without a new tour bus itinerary. Rumors piled up. Retired? Out of steam? Distracted? The truth was simpler. He was home. When he came back, he didn't pretend the clock hadn't moved. Face the Promise carried a veteran's confidence, arrangements tight, vocals with that familiar upward burn. The honors came too, halls of fame, lifetime accolades. If you only measure artists by trophies, that's the highlight reel. But Seger's reel wasn't made of plaques. It was packed houses in the Midwest and everywhere else, people who'd grown up with the voice and still heard themselves in it. A serious back issue nearly shut the door for good. And for a moment, it looked like the story might fade on an ellipsis. Instead, he put a period at the end of the sentence, the right way. One more run, the Roll Me Away tour. A farewell that felt more like a thank you. He didn't change the formula to chase fads. He played the songs like Prayer and Promise. We've Got Tonight still made whole arenas breathe in sync. Turn the Page still lifted hair on arms with that first sax line. Night Moves still held time, still just long enough for you to remember who you were when you first heard it. So what makes Bob Seger's legacy different in a business that eats legacies for breakfast? He never made the spotlight the subject. He sang about the second shift worker, the couple who can't fix everything but choose each other anyway, the kid staring through a windshield into the future. The grown-up who realizes the future turned into a mortgage and a memory, and somehow that's beautiful too. He didn't need scandal to stay interesting. He had the courage to be ordinary on purpose, which is rarer than pyrotechnics. There's a myth that you have to reinvent yourself every season or get left in the dust. He never bought that. He let life do the reinventing. The early records carry the live wire burn of a band trying to kick down a door. The later ones breathe deeper, look around, tell you what they see. He didn't pivot to chase whoever was topping the chart that week. He trusted that honest writing outlives fashion. He was right. That's why his songs still show up in films, on road trip playlists, at backyard grills where 3 generations know the words without remembering when they learned them. You can change snare sounds. You can't fake a lived-in line. And if you need one image to tie the journey together, don't picture a trophy case. Picture a dim bus aisle at 1:30 a.m., city lights flicking across the ceiling, a notebook open, a line he's been humming for days, finally finding the right chord. That's where most of this really happened. In motion, in faith, in the belief that you keep showing up and the songs will meet you halfway. Some nights the crowd roars, some nights they don't. The work stays the same. How does a factory worker's son become the voice of America's working class? He learns to listen. He carries his hometown with him. He writes about things that don't trend, but always matter. Love, time, work, regret, hope. He tells the truth, even when the truth makes for a slower groove or a quieter chorus. He keeps the band tight, the lyrics simple and sharp, the voice set to human first. And when the world finally leans in, he doesn't gloat. He gets back to work. In the end, Bob Seger didn't win because he shouted the loudest. He won because he meant it. He took a Detroit steel voice and welded it to stories with grease under their nails and sky in their eyes. He turned American miles into music big enough to carry you and simple enough to sing along to. That echo you hear decades later isn't nostalgia, it's recognition. You've been there. He was just brave enough to say it out loud. And that's why, when the first notes of Night Moves sparkle through car speakers on some late drive, the past doesn't feel far away. It feels present. It feels possible. It feels like a life measured not in headlines, but in verses that refuse to fade. If that's not the measure of a legacy, what is? Because long after the tour buses are parked and the house lights are up, those songs are still out there, steady, unshakable, built to last, like a highway you know by heart, waiting for you to roll the windows down and sing. If this story hit home, stick around. Tap subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive. Drop a comment with the artist you want covered next. Your requests drive what we make. And if you enjoyed this one, a quick like helps more people find it. Thanks for riding along.